Owning a ranch had always been my dream. I imagined a huge stretch of land far away from the noise of the city, somewhere I could breathe fresh air and live life at my own pace. After years of saving every spare dollar and working nonstop, I finally found the perfect place. It was a massive 200-acre ranch tucked away at the end of a long, scenic road. The moment I saw it, I knew it was exactly what I had been searching for. The land was incredible. Tall trees surrounded the property on all sides, forming a thick, beautiful forest that made the ranch feel completely secluded from the outside world. The only way to reach the property was through a single private road that led from the highway through the forest to my gate. To me, that was perfect. It meant peace, privacy, and a quiet life away from everything. The previous owner, an older farmer named Mr. Henderson, had lived there for decades. During the closing process, he told me something interesting that stuck with me. "This road is the only way in or out," he said, handing me a heavy old iron key. It looked ancient, the kind of key you'd expect to see in a museum. "And this opens the gate at the entrance. It's the only one that exists. Guard it." At the time, I chuckled and nodded. I assumed it was just one of those charming country traditions passed down from owner to owner. I slipped the key into my desk drawer and didn't think much about it. I had no idea that key would eventually save my ranch. The first few months after moving in were pure bliss. I repaired the old farmhouse room by room, bringing life back to the place. I started building a small herd of cattle and spent most evenings sitting on my porch watching the sunset roll across the fields. The sky would turn shades of orange and purple while the wind moved gently through the tall grass. Life felt simple and peaceful. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Creekwood Estates Homeowners Association. At first, I thought the mail carrier had made a mistake. Creekwood Estates was a brand new luxury housing development located miles away on the other side of the forest. It had absolutely nothing to do with my ranch. Curious, I opened the envelope. The letter inside was formal and carried a tone that felt oddly condescending. According to the message, because my private road eventually connected to the highway through an area they claimed was under their community jurisdiction, I was now considered part of their homeowners association. Attached to the letter was a large bill. They were charging me for road maintenance, landscaping, and other so-called community fees. I actually laughed out loud when I finished reading it. There had to be some kind of mistake. So I wrote them a polite response explaining that my ranch had existed long before their development was built. I pointed out that my road was privately deeded as part of my property and had been that way for over 100 years. I assumed that would clear everything up. A week later, another letter arrived. This one was very different. It came directly from the president of the HOA, a woman named Karen. And yes, that really was her name. Her message was far less friendly. She accused me of refusing to cooperate with the association and claimed my behavior was unacceptable. According to her, even though the road legally belonged to me, my use of it somehow affected the aesthetic harmony and property values of their community. Then she added something even more ridiculous. If I refused to pay the HOA dues, along with newly added late fee, the association would be forced to secure the community perimeter. I was furious. This was my land, my road. My ranch had existed long before their suburban development ever appeared on the map. I immediately contacted a lawyer. After reviewing the documents and property records, he confirmed exactly what I already believed. The road was legally mine, no questions asked. The HOA had absolutely zero authority over my property. My lawyer sent them a formal cease and desist letter telling them to stop harassing me. I figured that would be the end of the nonsense. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few mornings later, I climbed into my truck and drove down the long road toward the highway to pick up supplies from town. As I approached the entrance, I suddenly slammed on the brakes. Blocking the road was a massive black iron fence that hadn't been there the night before. It stretched across the entire entrance, sealing it off completely. Right in the center was a large decorative sign that read, "Welcome to Creekwood Estates. Private property, residents only." They had built an entire fence overnight, and it completely blocked the only road leading to my ranch. My blood started boiling. This wasn't just harassment anymore. They had physically trapped me on my own land. I immediately called the sheriff's department. An officer arrived shortly after, inspected the fence, and reviewed the property documents I showed him. He shook his head sympathetically. Unfortunately, he explained that since the HOA claimed the fence was built on their side of property line, it was technically a civil dispute. That meant it would have to be settled in court. Court cases like that could take months, sometimes even years. Meanwhile, my ranch was completely cut off. I couldn't bring in supplies. I couldn't transport cattle to market. Even delivery trucks couldn't reach the property anymore. It became painfully obvious what they were trying to do. They were hoping the financial pressure would force me to sell the ranch. Once I gave up, they could buy the land and expand their cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood. The next few days were miserable. I paced around my farmhouse in frustration. My cattle feed supply was running low. A veterinarian who was supposed to visit couldn't reach the property. Every day that passed meant more financial losses. Even basic groceries became a problem. I began rationing supplies and planning carefully how long everything would last. The isolation started to feel suffocating. My beautiful ranch suddenly felt less like paradise and more like prison. Every time I looked toward the road leading to the highway, all I saw was that ugly black fence blocking the entrance. Somewhere inside their fancy neighborhood, the HOA board was probably feeling pretty proud of themselves. Karen likely imagined that I would eventually break down and beg for mercy, ready to sell my ranch just to escape the situation. What she didn't realize was that they had made one very big mistake. They didn't know about Mr. Henderson, and they definitely didn't know about his key. One afternoon, while digging through my desk searching for my lawyer's phone number, my hand brushed against something cold and heavy. It was the iron key Mr. Henderson had given me. His words echoed in my head. "This opens the gate at the entrance. It's the only one." I stared at the key for a long moment. Then slowly, a smile spread across my face. The HOA had built their fence around the old gate posts that had stood at the entrance to the road for over a century. Instead of removing them, they had incorporated the original gate into their new fence design, probably because it was easier and cheaper. And that old gate still had the same lock it had always had. A lock designed for one very specific key. My key. The HOA believed they had locked me inside my own ranch. What they didn't realize was that they had just handed me complete control over their entire neighborhood. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I brewed a pot of coffee, grabbed the iron key, and climbed into my truck. Driving down the road, I reached the new fence and parked right in front of the gate. There it was. The same old gate Mr. Henderson had used for years, now proudly displayed as part of the HOA's fancy entrance. Right in the middle was the old lock. It looked a little rusty, but it was still intact. With a bit of dramatic flair, I slid the iron key into the lock. It resisted at first, but after a firm twist, I heard the most satisfying sound imaginable. Click! The lock popped open. I pushed the heavy gate wide, drove my truck through, and then very carefully closed the gate behind me. Then I locked again. From the outside, I was free. But now every single resident of Creekwood Estates was trapped inside their own neighborhood. Their beautiful gated entrance had just become a very expensive prison. I drove into town, bought my supplies, and treated myself to a large breakfast at the diner. I took my time enjoying every bite. Around 8 o'clock that morning, my phone started ringing. It was the sheriff. He sounded stressed. "We're getting dozens of calls from Creekwood Estates," he said. "Apparently their main gate is locked, and no one can get it open. The entire neighborhood is trapped. Do you know anything about that?" I tried my best to sound innocent. "An iron gate blocking a road?" I said, "That sounds awful. I know exactly how that feels. Something like that has been blocking me from leaving my property all week." The sheriff went silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. Finally, he said, "I'll be right there." When I returned to the gate later that morning, the scene was absolute chaos. A long line of luxury cars stretched down the road, horns blaring. Residents stood outside in pajamas and bathrobes, shouting into their phones. And right at the front of the crowd was Karen. Her face was bright red with fury. The moment she saw me, she marched straight toward my truck. "You did this," she shouted. "You will be hearing from my lawyer. This is illegal." I leaned against my truck and calmly sipped my coffee. "Really, Karen?" I said, Illegal? Because I believe someone told me this kind of situation is a civil dispute. I gestured toward the large sign. And according to your own sign, this is private property. I'm just helping you secure your community perimeter. Isn't that what you wanted? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just then the sheriff pulled up, looked at the crowd, looked at the lock gate, and then looked at me. He sighed. "Can you open the gate?" he asked. I said loudly so everyone could hear. "But this is the only key. And considering the HOA illegally blocked my road, I'd like to make sure that problem gets fixed first." Karen looked like she was about to explode. "What do you want?" she demanded. I smiled. "First, this entire fence gets removed today, not tomorrow. Today. Second, the HOA issues a written apology for blocking access to my property and pays for all the financial losses I suffered this week. And third, you sign a legal agreement stating the HOA will never interfere with me or my ranch again." The residents behind her began shouting. They wanted the gate open so they could go to work. Karen realized she had no choice. Through clenched teeth, she nodded. "Fine." I unlocked the gate. Within seconds, a flood of luxury SUVs roared out of the neighborhood. Later that same day, a crew arrived and began tearing down the fence. By the afternoon, I received a certified check covering my financial losses, along with a very reluctant written apology. The story spread quickly around town. The HOA became a complete laughingstock, and Karen eventually resigned as president. A month later, the entire situation was forgotten by everyone except me. Now, every time I drive down that quiet road to my ranch, I smile. Because sometimes the solution to your biggest problem is something you've been carrying in your pocket all along. And all it takes is the right key.